Little black boy told the judge, "I'm my mom's lawyer." Then something unbelievable happened. The courtroom was silent. All eyes turned toward the small boy standing beside his mother. He barely reached the table's edge, his hands trembling, as he placed a stack of worn papers in front of him. The judge frowned, confused. "And who are you?" the man asked, his voice echoing. The boy looked up, his eyes burning with determination. "I'm my mom's lawyer." A ripple of disbelief swept through the room. Some chuckled. Others stared in shock. No one believed he could change anything, but by the time he finished speaking, not a single soul in that courtroom would forget his name. Darnell was just 11 years old, growing up in a small southern town where his family's name was whispered with judgment. His mother, Carla, worked 2 jobs, cleaning houses by day, stocking shelves at night, to keep food on the table. Darnell's father was gone, and his mother was his entire world. Life in their neighborhood wasn't easy. The streets were cracked, the playground rusted, and the air heavy with unspoken rules about where people like them belonged. Darnell learned early that being young, poor, and black meant you had to fight twice as hard to be heard. Then one cold January morning, everything changed. Carla was accused of stealing expensive jewelry from one of the houses she cleaned. The accusation came from a wealthy woman whose word carried weight in the town, more weight than Carla's truth ever could. The police never questioned the claim. They didn't search for other suspects. They simply came to Carla's door, handcuffed her in front of her son, and took her away. The court set a trial date. Carla couldn't afford a lawyer, and the public defender barely met with her twice. Every time Darnell visited her in the small holding cell, he could see the fear she tried to hide. That's when a fire lit inside. Him. He decided he wouldn't let his mother stand alone. Darnell began spending every free moment in the dusty back corner of the public library. He pored over books about courtroom procedures, trial strategies, and famous cases where the underdog had won. The librarians, curious about his dedication, quietly slipped him extra materials. He found old videos of court trials on the library computers and studied the way lawyers spoke, how they presented evidence, how they questioned witnesses, and how they built trust with the jury. Late at night, when his mother thought he was sleeping, he wrote questions and arguments in a worn notebook. Word got around town about the boy who thinks he's a lawyer. Some laughed at him. Others shook their heads, saying he didn't know what he was getting into. But Darnell didn't care. He knew the truth. His mother was innocent, and he was determined to prove it. The days before the trial were tense. At the grocery store, people whispered when Carla walked past. At school, a group of kids mocked Darnell, saying the judge would laugh in his face. He ignored them, channeling his frustration into preparation. One evening, Darnell overheard 2 men outside a convenience store talking about the case. They mentioned seeing the wealthy woman's own nephew pawn a gold necklace weeks before the theft accusation. His heart raced. Could this be the break they needed? The next day, Darnell tracked down the pawn shop owner. At first, the man refused to talk. But when Darnell returned with a handwritten request for court testimony and the promise that he would make the truth known, the man relented. He handed over a pawn ticket with the nephew's name on it. Darnell carefully added this to his growing stack of evidence. He knew the public defender wasn't going to fight hard, so he made a bold decision. He would ask the judge to let him speak for his mother. The morning of the trial, Carla tried to talk him out of it. "Baby, they won't take you seriously," she whispered. But Darnell just looked her in the eye and said, "Mama, if I don't try, they'll never hear the truth." When they entered the courtroom, heads turned. Darnell walked with his mother to the defense table, clutching his notebook and a small stack of papers. The judge peered over his glasses. "Young man, do you know where you are?" "Yes, Your Honor," Darnell said firmly. I'm here to represent my mother. Gasps filled the room. The prosecutor smirked. This is highly irregular, he said, but the judge, perhaps intrigued by the boy's courage, allowed him to make a statement. Darnell's voice wavered at first. He began by describing who his mother was, a hard-working woman who spent her life caring for others. He then methodically dismantled the accusation, pointing out the lack of fingerprints, the absence of surveillance footage, and the inconsistencies in the wealthy woman's testimony. Then, with the confidence of someone far beyond his years, he presented the pawn ticket. This, he said, holding it up, belongs to her nephew. It's dated before the day they said my mom stole the necklace. The room went still. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. The judge leaned forward, examining the document. Darnell didn't stop there. He spoke about fairness, about how people in their community were too often judged by the color of their skin instead of the truth. His words weren't just legal arguments, they were a plea for justice. By the time he finished, even the court stenographer had tears in her eyes. The judge called for a short recess. When he returned, his tone was firm. The evidence provided by this young man raises reasonable doubt. The charges against Carla Johnson are dismissed. Carla broke down, tears streaming down her face as she pulled her son into her arms. The wealthy accuser sat in stunned silence while murmurs of admiration spread through the courtroom. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. They wanted to know how an 11-year-old had managed to do what trained adults had failed to do. Darnell simply said, "I told the truth. That's all." News of his stand spread beyond their town. People wrote letters of support, some even sending donations to help Carla start fresh. The pawnshop ticket led to a separate investigation, and the real culprit was eventually charged. In the months that followed, Darnell's story became a symbol of resilience and courage. His teachers began encouraging him to join debate teams. Neighbors who had once avoided his family now greeted them with respect. But for Darnell, it wasn't about fame or attention. It was about his mother, the woman who had taught him that silence in the face of injustice is the same as agreeing with it. And so, the boy who once sat quietly in the back of the library left the world with a question. If an 11-year-old can stand up to a system stacked against him, what's stopping the rest of us?